Now, the British indie band, the 1975, is facing legal action tonight for violating Malaysia's strict anti-gay laws when they perform there in July. Organisers of the Good Vibes Festival are demanding compensation from the band after lead singer Matty Healy criticised the country's stance on homosexuality, where it's punishable by up to 20 years in prison. He then went on to kiss his bandmate Ross McDonald on stage, resulting in the complete shutdown of the festival. Promoters say he tarnished the festival's reputation and intentionally contravened their agreement. Well, let's discuss this with human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell. Welcome, Peter. What do you think of what Matty Healy did?
I think the way he did it was perhaps a bit problematic. But my Malaysian LGBT friends and colleagues say that it was a great positive thing. What Matty Healy did was more effective than anybody has ever done before to shine a light on Malaysia's homophobic legislation and persecution. So they are fully supportive, and I believe they represent the broad swathe of LGBT+ and liberal opinion in Malaysia, contrary to the way the story's been reported.
You see, interestingly, so you say your LGBT friends there are in favour of what he did, but there's been a lot of criticism reported in the gay press as well from Malaysia's LGBT community, who talk about performative activism that is going to make their lives even harder.
Well, those are three people who are not elected, appointed or mandated to speak on behalf of the LGBT+ community. I respect their right to speak, but they're not representative. Many more Malaysian LGBT+ people, such as the acclaimed Malaysian LGBT poet Suri Chan, have spoken out saying that what Matty Healy and the 1975 did has been hugely positive in shining a light on the persecution of LGBTs in Malaysia. And they say, or she says, there has been no backlash. There's been no further crackdown. A crackdown already existed, and she says, thank heavens that Matty Healy shone a light on it.
And you said it was problematic in some ways. In what ways do you regard it as problematic?
Well, I think the language, the expletive-laden language was unnecessary and not helpful. But the essential points he made were right. And, you know, as a human rights defender, I think it's incumbent on everyone to speak out against human rights abuses. If Matty Healy hadn't spoken out, he would have been rightly condemned for silence and collusion with the Malaysian government. The fact that he did speak out is making the Malaysian government very angry because they have been exposed for the human rights abusers that they are.
What he could also have done, of course, is not go, not take the money and say why.
Well, I don't think he's going to get any money because he violated the contract. But according to my sources in Malaysia, he was advised when he got to Malaysia about the public caning of two lesbians, about the police raids on gay private parties and mass arrests, and that is what provoked him to speak out. So he was reacting, according to my sources, to what he was advised and what he was told by Malaysian LGBT+ people. Now, if that's true, then I think it's wholly commendable. If he had stayed away, there would have been no exposure of the Malaysian government's horrendous homophobic record. If he had said nothing, there would have been no exposure of the government's homophobic record. So what he did in the circumstances, perhaps imperfect though it was really positive. Now, as a result of what he did, hundreds of millions of people across the world know about the extreme persecution of LGBT+ people in Malaysia, and that's a good thing.
And in your many years of campaigning on this and indeed other issues, what would you say has been, what have you seen as being particularly effective ways of changing people's minds or even changing the conversation around the issue of homosexuality?
Well, protest in repressive regimes is the only way, because governments like the Malaysian government are impervious to reason, compassion, evidence or research. They have a very hard-line position, and they've been cracking down, long before Matty Healy, they've been cracking down on the community. Just on the 29th of July, after Matty Healy's protest, 8 very courageous Ahmadi Muslims staged a solidarity protest with the LGBT+ community in downtown Kuala Lumpur. That was the first LGBT+ protest in Malaysia for many, many, many years. They've all been arrested. They're up on very serious major charges. And again, I want to know why the people who are so critical of Matty Healy aren't speaking out in defence of those brave Ahmadi Muslims. They're Muslim, but they accept LGBT plus people, and they spoke out in that protest for LGBT plus human rights, and they are now going to pay with many years imprisonment. Why aren't the critics running to their cause?
Let's bring in our panellists on this issue. Aubrey and Madeline are back with me. Initial thoughts?
Well, there's an old saying, which is that if you're not getting hit by the stones, then you're not standing close enough to the people that you are supposed to be defending. And so I think, actually, there's a lot to be commended in what Matthew Healy tried to do, which was essentially stand with people that he was an ally for. And he's obviously been criticised for that, and that means that he has really kind of put himself on the line and stood very firmly with them. Obviously, I think Peter alluded to the fact that the way he did it, there were some concerns about the expletives and so on and so forth. But I think the intention is very admirable, and it's clearly drawn attention to an issue that otherwise we wouldn't be talking about. We wouldn't be talking about the persecution that LGBT plus people face in countries around the world. And I think that is very important as well.
Madeline?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, music has always been inherently political. So I think for people to say that this is one environment in which, you shouldn't turn up with your political slogans or your political messaging. I mean, granted, yes, he went about it in a slightly boorish way, but I think some of the criticism of him has been absolutely ridiculous. Not to mention the financial case that is being made against the 1975 on the basis that the festival had to be cancelled when it was the government that cancelled the festival and that was their choice. I think so much is being pinned on one single artist as a means of perhaps the Malaysian government are happy that we're talking about Matty Healy and we're not talking about their appalling record on LGBT rights.
Pick up on one of Peter's points, and I'm very aware, Peter, that across your life you have put your money where your mouth is. But the idea that someone in a tolerant liberal democracy like the UK is should call for protests and that sort of resistance within a repressive regime. What do we think about this?
Well, I mean, clearly it's a very difficult decision for people to go out and to protest and put their lives on the line and be at risk of further persecution and attack as well. So it's up to those individuals whether or not they sort of follow through with that and kind of respond to the call to arms. So I don't think he was kind of inciting anybody to do anything that they weren't kind of comfortable with. So, in my opinion, it seems like he's done a sort of sensible thing.
And the 1975 are going to lose money over this. He's basically scuppered his own performance fees and potentially has got this legal suit from the festival organisers. So he was prepared to put his money where his mouth was, and that, I think, is commendable. Another
criticism that I've seen is this notion of Matty Healy appearing as a white saviour in this situation. Does that hold water?
Well, I don't think he set out to be a white saviour. He set out to respond to the information he had about the persecution of LGBTs and thought it was his moral duty to say something. He actually said that he admitted that he made a mistake in agreeing to perform in Malaysia, but after being informed about the situation, he felt a duty to speak out and not be silent. That is the right thing to do. And I just wish more artists would do that in repressive regimes. You've got all these big stars who go to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and so on. They perform and say nothing, whereas Matty Healy performed and said something.
So are we all on the same page on this? Is it the duty of high-profile people in those situations within a repressive regime to say something, to do something?
It's not the first time it's happened, and it won't be the last. I mean, this is something high-profile music artists like this can draw attention to really important global and national issues that otherwise we wouldn't be talking about. I mean, we just wouldn't be spending this long talking about this specific issue in this country and the rights of people who are being persecuted unless a British artist had drawn attention to it. So
I suppose it's not so much the can they as the should they.
Well, I mean, he clearly has, and there will be other people that decide to do so as well. So, again, he's kind of standing up for what he thinks is right. As Madeline was saying, music has always been inherently political. This won't be the sort of first time or the last time this happens.
I'll tell you a message from a Malaysian LGBT person that I received. They said, "Thank heavens someone knows and cares. We felt totally isolated, totally neglected. We were invisible. Matty Healy, although he may have said it in the wrong way, he's drawn attention to our suffering, and we're really grateful for that. That's paraphrasing the words, and I think that's reflective of many Malaysian LGBTs.